Tomorrow on LWT, the feature film version of the adventures of young Dick Turpin, the early career of the notorious highwayman.
Good lad. Stand and deliver, Tom King. Stay where you are.
Turpin's fame soon spread.
Where's the man, Turpin? Or shall I have the answer beaten out of you?
Have you anything to say why judgment should not be passed upon you according to law?
So this is goodbye.
The legend of young Dick Turpin, tomorrow at 5:30.
Next on LWT, we'll be joining Trevor MacDonald at ITN for today's World News.
Breakthrough to weight loss. Breakthrough, yeah. Shape up the new way.
Now it's faster with Weight Watchers' new Quick Success program, and easier because you eat everyday food the whole family can enjoy.
Lose weight and stay slim. Breakthrough.
Join now, and your first class is free.
It's our most effective programme ever. Call London 491-1929 for details.
Weight loss.
Here, have you seen these new toasted cheese flavour crisps? They're from Walker's and you can't resist them. Lovely. And the packet matches me shoes.
Morning.
Morning.
Well, no rest for the wicked.
Enough free air miles to fly to Paris and back when you spend £200 or more on Hoover products. You know where to come.
Oh, Michael, you were wonderful. Oh, Michael, you were wonderful.
Come on, Dad. It's tea time.
Are you sure you don't want to stay, son?
Welcome them home to a Bernard Matthews lamb roast. Tender, succulent meat. A mouth-watering real meal any day of the week. Bernard Matthews brings them home to roast.
Michael forgot this.
What are people saying about Pan Am's super prices to the USA?
It was much cheaper. That's why I'm here. I couldn't have come otherwise.
Why? Because it's a cheap flight.
It seemed like a very good fare.
We got good value for money to come over.
I chose them because they were the cheapest I could find.
Very good deals.
We effectively got 2 single flights.
What's the best price?
It was very good value for money.
It was the cheapest fare I could get.
Pan Am. You can't get a lower fare from Heathrow.
A timeless village in the Yorkshire Dales, the setting for a new drama, a small family law firm dealing with the locals in Capstick's law, starting on Sunday at 7:45.
You're watching LWT, now today's World News.
Mr. Gorbachev lunches at Windsor and invites the Queen to Moscow. He tells a Guildhall audience there's no turning back from perestroika. Even Princess Beatrice makes way for grandmother's Soviet guests. And Health Secretary Kenneth Clark under fire in Manchester. Good evening. President Gorbachev has invited the Queen to make an historic visit to the Soviet Union. Within the last hour, Mrs. Thatcher confirmed the Queen had accepted. Mr. Gorbachev, now on his way home, announced in a speech at the Guildhall what he called a major step towards ending Soviet production of radioactive material for nuclear weapons. But he said Western efforts to modernize their nuclear arsenals would force the Soviets to do the same. Of the changes in his country, Mr. Gorbachev said, there is no turning back. Our people have firmly linked their destiny with perestroika. Replying, Mrs. Thatcher told him, in your vision lies a better life for the Soviet people. We are ready to help you. The Queen's invitation to Moscow came during a lunch at Windsor Castle.
The distant approach of the Soviet convoy into Windsor Great Park, the Coldstream Sergeant Major tidying the Guard of Honor, all signalled a small disruption in Princess Beatrice's nursery routine, removed inside in time for the Soviet Zills to sweep into the courtyard on the button of 1 o'clock. Here, in the footsteps of Tsar Nicholas 140 years before, and of Khrushchev and Bulganin 30 years ago, was Mikhail Gorbachev. An almost self-conscious arranging of his coat ahead of the royal handshake, the Queen wearing decisively non-communist red. Step forward a very British major with a fairly Russian command. And the ceremonial was underway, the East-West family tableau complete. Upstairs, the Queen conducted the Gorbachevs into a portrait-strewn Waterloo chamber, one of the few palace suites in Europe that can rival the finery of the great Kremlin halls that Mr. Gorbachev inherited from the Tsars. The Queen pointing out some of the Russian portraits of the Napoleonic era before moving on to St. George's Hall. In the Kremlin, too, there is such a hall. The pre-lunch chemistry was already beginning to show signs of both invitation and acceptance of the visit to Moscow. So long did that lunch continue that Beatrice was by now ready for tea and had to make her getaway before the Zills got moving. On the doorstep after lunch, now 20 minutes late, there were goodbyes and we'll meet again in Moscow. Though it will be some time before she actually goes, the Royal Diary will find it difficult to fit it in for another 2 years. Out at Heathrow, history and royalty were displaced by politics, much of the cabinet on hand to say farewell. The cementing of relations was done. It's questionable whether the Gorbachevs will come here again at all soon. But Mrs. Thatcher had secured her wish that he should stop here before anywhere else in Europe. Germany, France and Italy are now to come. The man who almost single-handedly has changed the meaning of Soviet from enemy to friend boarded his plane, the waves from the ground as demonstrative as those from the window. In flight, they lingered an extra turn in British airspace, dipped the wing, and headed for home. John Snow, ITN, Heathrow.
Almost everyone finds protocol and ceremonial a little daunting, especially in a foreign country. And as the national anthem started in Guildhall, Mr. Gorbachev was caught out slightly. The speech was very definitely not about the ceremonial past, but about the present and future. There was a pointed rejection of one of Mrs. Thatcher's most dearly held views, that nuclear weapons are a good deterrent.
I believe that it is high time that instead of speaking of how to deter others with nuclear weapons, we spoke of how to deter, to keep in check nuclear weapons themselves. It means putting an end to the accumulation and upgrading of those weapons.
There was one announcement that the Soviet Union is going to stop producing the sort of uranium used in those weapons, though they do have a stockpile, and one quite remarkable section on the changes going on inside the Soviet Union. Mr. Gorbachev said, yes, there was some opposition.
And we are aware that tests and trials are still ahead of us. We are faced with problems resulting from a lack of political culture. And weakness is impermissible here, also because it can slow down the process of democratization itself.